It's one thing to have like your voice silenced on Amazon, Twitter, what have you. It's quite another to have your bank tell you you can no longer do business there. That's something else that's happening. It happened to some of the people who have come on the show, including Nigel Farage across the pond, but more and more Americans. If you are at all involved in J6, you've been threatened potentially with debanking. And most conservatives have heard of this because it's publicized in right-wing circles. Saturday Night Live, not so much. They did a skit because Trump used the term over the weekend showing how clueless they are. Just watch this a little bit. It's at 18.
Trump did have a slight stumble this week while talking about banks, and he introduced an interesting new term called debank.
We're also going to place strong protections to stop banks and regulators from trying to debank you. They want to debank you, and we're going to debank.
I don't know what the hell debank means, but he might have to take de-ambulance to see the doctor.
I think that's the guy who's married to Scarlett Johansson. They don't have to worry about money. They don't have to worry about getting debanked because they're woke liberals, and they have no clue what's happening to real Americans. Your thoughts on the banking problem?
Thanks for the clip. That's a microcosm of the divide in this country. It's almost funny, but it's also sad because it shows that we effectively live in two different worlds. People on the island of Manhattan who watch that show, or are stars on it, have no understanding of what's happened to people that either want to embrace their Second Amendment rights or are standing up against, certain levels of repression. You don't even have to look that far than Canada as to what they did with truckers that wanted to resist taking, the fake vaccine called a shot. It's not a vaccine, by the way. I don't buy into their language because it has no attributes of a vaccine. But that's a different conversation for another day. They tried to exercise, their right, and they were debanked. The government went and took away their bank accounts. There's a series called Black Mirror where they started trying to show, this is like 8 years ago, the notion of, with technology, social credit scoring that they have again in a place like China. It seems like the leftists that run a lot of these Western European and some elements of the Democratic Party want to embrace that kind of social credit scoring. And the way that they're going to do it, again, is exactly the thing that's become my life's mission. They're not going to do it, obviously, through the government. They're going to use the private sector to make you irrelevant. And that's how they do it. So they go to certain huge private actors. That's one of the reasons why they want so much consolidation in the banking industry. Too big to fail, right? What did we do after the financial crisis? Nobody went to jail. You made every large bank actually bigger. So they are effectively stewards of the state. And they can control 3 or 4. That's why it's really not a big deal when you have 2 or 3 banking failures of the magnitude that you had under the Biden administration, because the less of these government-sponsored entities there are, and the more that they can control them and ultimately implement their will on people, which is what Canada just did. That's also taken place in the private sector. I've observed with places like PayPal, they were fining people for misinformation that they determined to be misinformation.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Parallel economy is so important. We need to finance alternatives to all of these institutions.
Okay, so let me ask you this. We have a minute left. How can people support you, right? Like, what exactly should they do?
Well, I think that one of the easiest ways is when I try to provide, offerings, whether, helping Tucker get up and running or Public Square and other companies that we're putting out there. Please do your best. It's my job to get the word out there. And thank you, Megyn, for having me and being able to do that, is to patronize things like Rumble and Public Square and other companies that share your values. That's the only way we're going to win. The more you continue to patronize these other companies, the harder it's going to be. But what we're doing, I think, is the essence of capitalism, which is to give people choice. If those companies want to behave that way, like Bud Light or Amazon, fine, that's your prerogative, unless the federal government's doing that and telling you to. However, we should have every right to have our own products and services. And my mission is to finance those, to do what you said, ensure that private companies are not infringing on the Bill of Rights.
The pressure to conform to political correctness has undeniably suppressed genuine debate in this country, and it's time we put a stop to it. Enter Freedom 2.0, the unapologetic bottled water company that proudly supports the freedom to speak, freedom to think, and the freedom to listen. We can't afford to remain silent any longer. It's crucial to make our support for the First Amendment crystal clear, and one impactful way to do it is by choosing products from companies that champion our values. Visit freedom20, just the numeral 2 and then O, the letter, .com, freedom20.com, and use the code MK for a 15% discount to stand with yours truly and millions of other Americans in celebrating the right to free speech. Freedom is not inherited. It's something we must actively fight for. So raise your voice and grab your bottle of Freedom 2.0 and make a statement. Cheers to Freedom 2.0. That's Freedom 2.0, not Freedom 20, and champion the power of free speech. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.